Hello everyone, I hope you're all well and welcome back to another Year 5 and 6 English tutorial. Today we are going to be looking at relative clauses and how to use them in our writing to a Year 5 and 6 standard. So hopefully you'll already be familiar with the basics of a relative clause. If you're not, then feel free to go back and have a look at the Year 3 and 4 video which has been put up today. So we're going to start at the beginning very briefly to explain what is a relative clause, to jog our memories. Now, a relative clause is a special type of subordinate clause, so that's a clause that can't stand on its own, that gives us extra information about a noun in our sentence. They always begin with a relative pronoun, although sometimes we miss it out when we're speaking. And there are two types. And this is the new bit of information for when you move up to Year 5 and 6. So there are two types of relative clauses. There are defining relative clauses and there are non-defining relative clauses. It sounds very complicated, but it basically explains when we need to use punctuation and when we don't need to use punctuation with our relative clauses. So let's have a look at the two different types. So we're going to start with defining relative clauses. So defining relative clauses are relative clauses where the information that's in them is essential to the sentence. It can't be missed out because it would mean that the sentence isn't as clear or doesn't make sense. It's needed to clearly identify the who or the what that we are speaking about. And because it is really essential to our sentence, we don't put commas around it. It stands as part of the main sentence. Okay. Here are the relative pronouns that we could use with a defining relative clause. Now, there's lots of different ones we could use for these. So we've got who, which, not pointy nose which, but which spelt like this with an H in it. That, whose, when, where, and why. Okay, and an example of one of these, a defining relative clause where we need that relative clause for the sentence to make sense, would be babies that are born early need extra care. Now that is essential to the sentence because if we didn't have this bit, the bit that starts with our relative pronoun, the that here, and the are born early, if we didn't have that bit of the sentence, it would just say babies need extra care, which isn't really what we were trying to say the sentence was about. We were saying that specifically babies that are born early need extra care. So that information is essential to the sentence, so it doesn't need to go in commas, and it is a defining relative clause. We then move on to the other type of relative clause, which are the ones that most people are familiar with from their work in Year 3 and 4, and that's a non-defining relative clause. So these are ones where the information in the relative clause isn't essential to the main idea of the sentence, okay? It just gives us some interesting additional information about who or what we're speaking about. Because it's not essential to the main sentence, it's like an extra, it's like a bit of gossip, then you put commas around it and you can't forget those. There are only these three relative pronouns that would be used with these, so who, which, and whose. Okay, and an example of one of those would be this one. The cashier, so that's someone who works in a shop on the till. The cashier, comma, whose name was Emma, comma, was extremely friendly. Okay, now that bit in the middle, this bit beginning with our relative pronoun, whose name was Emma, there's our relative clause. It is a non-defining relative clause because the rest of the sentence, we still get the idea of it without the relative clause being there. The cashier was extremely friendly. The fact that her name was Emma is interesting, but it's not particularly essential. We don't need it for the sentence to make sense. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to move on and I'm going to give you some more examples with each of the different pronouns to hopefully make this a little bit clearer for you. Okay. Now, if you feel like, actually, you explain that and I understand that, then what I'd like you to do is write a sentence for each of these pronouns. One sentence where it's being used as in a defining relative clause and one where it's being used in a non-defining relative clause. If you're not sure, then just look at what I'm about to do and then you can have a go afterwards. Okay, so first things first, we're going to start with our defining clauses. Now remember, these are the ones where the information in the relative clause is essential for the sentence to really make sense. So I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to start off. So the main bit of my sentence, I'm going to say, I went to see the woman. Okay. Now, at the minute, I could have paused my sentence there, but really, to make that sentence clear, I need to explain what woman it is I'm going to see. So I'm going to say, I went to see the woman who, so I'm going to use that as my relative pronoun, who, and I'm going to go back to one of our previous writing challenges with the last spell breather, and I'm going to go back to who cast the spell. So I'm going a little bit magical in that sentence. Okay, I went to see the woman who cast the spell. It doesn't need commas because it is a defining relative clause and we need it for the sentence to really make clear sense. Okay, for which I'm going to try this one. I'm going to say the gardener fixed the fence, and then I'm going to use my relative pronoun here, and I'm going to say fix the fence. Which fence? Why did he fix it? I'm going to say the fence which was broken. Okay. And that doesn't need a comma because it's a defining relative clause. We need it to explain what fence it was that he was fixing and why he needed to fix it. Okay, for whose. Now this is one where people quite often get confused because they get confused with the word whose, which is about possession, and the word whose with an apostrophe s, which means who is. Okay, but we're looking at this word whose, and I'm going to start off with my main clause, my main sentence, which is going to be, I tried to help the family. And what family is it that I was trying to help? Because at the minute it's not clear why I would be trying to help that family. So I'm going to say I tried to help the family, and I'm going to say whose car. So that's what they possessed. They possessed the car. That's why I've used whose car had broken down. And that helps to make our sentence a lot more clear about what family I'm talking about. So that would be a defining relative clause, no commas needed. I'm going to speed up now. I'm going to say on this one, so it's a that is going to be my relative pronoun. So I'm going to say the dish. On what dish? I'm going to say the dish that I ordered. That I ordered. And what about that dish? The dish that I ordered was delicious. Okay, so as you can see this time, because my noun was at the beginning of the sentence, my relative clause has ended up being in the middle, but it still doesn't need commas because it's really essential. The dish was delicious, but it's not clear what dish I'm talking about there. So the dish that I ordered was delicious. Okay, it's essential, so we don't need those commas in there. The next one, I'm going to say, I will never forget the place. I will never forget the place. And then my relative pronoun, as you can see, is going to be the word where. I will never forget the place where, and I'm going to say where we met. Okay, it's essential to the sentence because otherwise I'm not making clear what place I'm talking about. So I will never forget the place where we met. There is no comma needed. It's a defining relative clause. Next one, I'm going to do another I will never forget. I will never forget. But this time, instead of the place, I'm going to say I will never forget the moment and I'm going to say I will never forget the moment when. That's going to be my relative pronoun. I will never forget the moment when I first saw you. Okay, I need that information because it makes clear what moment I'm talking about, so there is no comma needed. It's a defining relative clause. And then the last one I'm going to do, will you tell me the reason and then I need my relative pronoun why, because I'm going to give a bit more information here about the reason. Will you tell me the reason why you came? And this time I need a question mark at the end. Okay. Will you tell me the reason doesn't make clear on its own what reason I'm talking about. So will you tell me the reason why you came? I need that information for my sentence to be clear, so it doesn't need a comma. It's a defining relative clause. Now I'm just going to very quickly fill in these last three boxes for you. These are the ones you're probably more familiar with. So this time I'm going to say my main sentence is going to be, my sister lives in London. Okay, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of extra information about my sister. This time it's not going to be essential because you already know who I'm talking about, my sister. It's quite clear. So this time I'm going to just tell you that my sister, who is 2 years, if I can squeeze it on, older than me, comma, lives in London. It needs to be in commas because, capital letter for London, because it's not essential to the sentence. It would still make sense. My sister lives in London. You would know exactly who I was talking about, but I've just told you something additional about her, some extra info. So it goes in commas that time. It's a non-defining relative clause. The next one, I'm going to say the house. Okay, my main sentence is going to be, the house has just opened to the public. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this house. I'm going to say the house which, so remember which is used when you're talking about things or animals. Okay, you should pick that up from the year 3-4 videos. So the house which was built in 1878, comma, has just opened to the public. Okay, so if I was talking about a royal residence maybe, so for example, I don't know, Osborne House, which is placed on the Isle of Wight, you might say the house has just opened to the public, but I'm telling you something extra about it. The house, which was built in 1878, has just opened to the public. So it is not essential for the sentence to make sense, but it helps to give some extra information. So it's a non-defining relative clause. And then the last one, I'm going to say the couple. Okay, and this time I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the couple, something that's not, my main sentence was going to be the couple are very sweet, but I'm going to tell you something extra about this couple. I'm going to say the couple who own a French poodle Oh, sorry. No, I wasn't going to do that. I was going to say the dog because I'm meant to be using the pronoun whose. So the couple whose dog is a French poodle. I'm not going to fit it in now. Comments are very sweet. I'll squeeze it in under there. Are very sweet. Poor presentation by Miss Waldworth. So the couple are very sweet. That makes sense. If I had already been talking about them, it would be clear. And so the couple, comma, whose dog is a French poodle. It's not essential for us to understand who it was who was sweet, but it's an additional bit of information for you about the couple. So it needs to be in commas, and it is called a non-defining relative clause. So what I would like you to do now, if you haven't already had a go, is to write some of your own. Now you can use my main sentences in black if you would prefer. Okay, that makes your life easier. And then you can just try replacing my relative clauses with your own examples. Or if you would prefer, you can completely change the sentences and write your own sentences and then make your own relative clauses to go in. But I would love for you to have a go. Okay, once you have finished, just double check that your defining clauses, relative clauses, have not got commas in them and that they are essential for the sentence to be clear, and that your non-defining relative clauses are separated by commas from the rest of the sentence. Thank you very much for watching this very long English tutorial for year 5 and 6, and I'll hopefully see you on the next video.